Yeah, probably we wait a couple of minutes until everybody is logged in.
I like your background, Angelica. It's better than mine.
I sent it to you. I did it this week because I realized that I should have something. But I like the roll up, and I'm preparing one like yours also. By the way, did you hear something from Dr. Lotira?
I can't hear you. You're breaking.
This was broken, your connection, I think. Or is it mine?
No, Angelica, yours is okay. It's fine. Yes. I think it's Prof is the one having issues. I think he needs to only use the audio because whenever he puts the video on, it keeps dropping off. So I think his connection is a bit weak.
There you are again.
I can hear you now. Yeah, I lost. There was a problem. I changed my network was having issues. So yeah, I didn't hear what you are saying. Morning, Christian. Morning.
Yeah. Good morning. Yeah, it was actually a side question, not on this topic today, but since I'm curious how Dr. Lotira is doing, and Simon Muti and Munene Kitama, they were also asking whether we can expect him today because they share some slides with him.
Raphael is at the embassy as we talk now. We are yet to get our visa, but we are positive. Of course, that's very late, last minute. So, but he has just told me things are well, but he's still at the embassy. So there's no need to worry. But I'm not sure he's gonna be able to join. Maybe later. So I think we shall proceed with Simon. But all is well about the visa. We haven't received them, but there's good news.
Good, thank you very much.
But that means who of you will we be seeing next week here in Witzenhausen?
Raphael will be there,
Yeah?
and I will also join later.
You will also join later?
Yes.
But the others, it's not foreseen that they come, like Muti or Anthony, those guys.
Munene, he is one of the travelers, right?
Yeah,
Munene Kitama will be coming?
Yes.
Yeah. I sent you the list, Christian.
Cool. Yeah.
Khalid from Uganda Christian University will also be traveling.
Okay.
And Monica from Makerere.
Very good. So.
And some of our participants, like Eunice, John, and yeah.
Very good.
Aaron, Derek.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Actually, we have a really nice overlap between module 3, Rangeland, sustainable rangeland management, and module 2, transdisciplinary research. And this makes also sense for today's topic, looking at rangeland as socio-ecological systems. And yeah, I'm switching to our introduction. As you see, that now we have the talk of, the last talk of this kickoff week. And Simon Muti and Munene Kitama, they are ready to talk about rangelands as social ecological systems and ecosystem services. I also want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome the speakers, all our panelists, and I will also hand over to Forum for completing the welcome. I have one additional remark that our panel is increasing because we asked one of the participants or a group of our participants to be engaged in the question and answer session. And so you see Esther Mulli being here representing this group and will be, as I said, active, especially in the Q&A part. Munene and Simon, this is also meant for assisting if you are asking, is there a new question in the chat, or if somebody is raising their hand, so they also can help with that. And talking about this, I probably can ask Dr. Amito again about what I missed to say about the rules and procedures and the welcome of the forum.
Okay, thank you, Angelica. So participants, you're most welcome to day 4 of our training, and we would like to request you to raise your questions under the Q&A section, which is for questions and answers, as our presenters are delivering the material. And then the comments, you can raise them through the chat section. Those who have burning questions, they can also raise their hands, and we shall be able to allow you to ask or to raise your comment by giving you the chance to talk directly through the microphone. So we thank you very much, and you are most welcome to this training.
Can I start off?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, my talk, I'll start with socio-ecological systems, sorry. And along the line, in case Dr. or Professor Rotira comes, you'll add something on top. After this, then I'll move to rangeland resources and ecosystem services. But I wish to start with the rangeland and socio-ecological systems, rather. And I'll first start with the defining, even though it has been defined before, but still reiterate, it's important we move together. And as I say, rangelands are actually these vast landscapes. And in most cases, there are many.
Sorry, Simon.
Yes.
We can't see your presentation yet.
You can't see it?
No.
Oh, perhaps I've not shared.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no,
I'm sorry.
You have not yet shared.
Okay. Hopefully.
Yes. Yeah, now you are sharing.
Is it visible? No.
You launch it. You have not opened it. You are just sharing the folder.
Is it visible now?
No, you have not selected it. You have selected the desktop only. Now put it in a PowerPoint presentation mode now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just 1 minute. Is it okay?
Yes, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry for that. So I said I will first just shortly define rangelands. I know it has been defined there before, but it's good we work together. And so in brief, I was saying rangelands are the vast natural landscapes that cannot be used for agricultural purposes for various reasons. And as you are told, these rangelands include grasslands, typically tends to be found in the lowlands. There is also the savannas, there's shrublands, desert and tundra. Perhaps later we'll come to see how they come to appear. In a way, they are related to the wind systems, which define our rainfall and other climatic conditions. Okay, sorry. I introduced the topic, but I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Simon Muti. Actually, I'm an agronomist, but with a lot of interest in rangeland, because that is what defines us. Good. Now, rangelands as socio-ecological systems, this actually looks at, in a simplified manner, the framework that integrates the human activities and the ecological components of rangelands and their interactions. That is, I don't know whether to call them the 2-tier or the 3-tier. We have on one hand the rangelands, then we bring the society or the man and his activities in between. And how do we ensure that they are ecologically sustainable in balance? And so we'll be looking at, later, that is what I've said, we'll be looking at the rangeland resources and ecosystem services. And in this, we'll be looking at the importance of rangelands and their ecosystem services. Now, we have sorry, I think this defined my topics. So rangeland is a socio-ecological systems. They are primarily, or they provide us with, because we need to exploit them and see how they can serve us. So even though we say they are fragile lands, but one way or the other, they should serve us or serve the human beings, but sustainably. So in this regard, you find that in most of these rangelands, that is where we obtain much of our protein, the meat. Actually, I think it was defined that almost over 60% of the meat we produce is mainly from rangelands. And because the conditions there support, when you come to these high fertile areas, or fertile, or what we may call high potential areas, you find there may be a competition between the livestock and other high value crops. So in most cases, you find that rangelands, the animal production in rangelands, we can say is a comparative advantage than having them in the high potential areas. Also in the high potential areas, they suffer, or they may suffer from a lot of diseases, which are in rangelands, they are so dry, those diseases may not be there, they may be limited. We are also saying the rangelands help to support our wildlife. Almost 90% of our wildlife is found in this rangeland. And that forms the national parks, the game reserves, and some of the, can I call them wetlands, which cannot support crop growth, but can be of use to give us other services. As I've said, these areas, they cover between 40 to 50% or more of the land surface, and they are vital for biodiversity, pastoralism, food security, and carbon storage, that is carbon sequestration. Now, when it comes to biodiversity, most of the rangeland, especially, which have not been interfered by man, that is where we found a wide diversity of wildlife and some of the rare species. Entry of man into these rangelands now threatens these rare species and birds. And so that's why we have to devise a sustainable way of managing the rangelands. Pastoralism, very important, because it maintains the social life of our people who live in those areas. Without these rangelands, perhaps the pastoralism will not be there per se, but they live in harmony and they are able to move together. Now, one of the most interesting things about the rangelands and coming the man, we find that man has overexploited the high potential areas and is now moving towards the rangeland. Now, the rangelands, they are quite fragile, and they face a problem of intrusion by man. And so that's why we have to find a better way of sustaining or living sustainably with them. Now, later, we shall see some of the human conflicts which occur as a result of the two sides, the pastoralists and the agriculturists, as the weather or as the weather hits hard on the rangelands. And as I've said, the provision of protein or animals by these rangelands helps us meet the issue of the food security, which is very important. Then come to the issue of the carbon sequestration. Globally, we are having a big challenge in terms of controlling the greenhouse gases, particularly emission of the carbon dioxide. So these areas, they form large parts which consume a lot of carbon dioxide and also help us in other ecosystem services. Now, socio-ecological system normally refers to the framework that integrate the human activities, and I think I've said that, and it explains how human communities and natural ecosystems are interconnected and interdependent. So there is a small, I gave some bit of a framework. This is just an example, whereby in those pastoral areas, we see how the climatic conditions impact on the rangelands, and these climatic conditions impact on the various activities of man, especially the issue of the herd sizes and all that, and during particular seasons. So we find that man has to adapt to the climatic systems in the rangelands if they have to survive sustainably. And their mutual coexistence is what helps man to get maximum benefit from these rangelands. For example, a man may keep either the livestock in these rangelands, or that is in terms as pastoralists, or he may use the rangelands to harvest excess pastures during the rainy season and conserve them for the dry season. So in terms of the activities of man and being able to balance his balance sheet or books, he has to ensure that during the times of plenty, he may need to conserve the excess forage or fodder so that he can use in the dry areas. And when there is excess production of these of the grasses or forages, he can diversify his livestock and also sell more during that period. But when the season gets towards when it is so dry, he may decide to sell, earn some money, and keep some in the bank for future use. And then, so it is sort of a cycle. So for continuous existence of man in these areas, he has to create an harmony and a balance sheet whereby he is able to gain during the bad times, that is the drought periods, and during the rainy seasons when there is excess of fodder. So a man has to oscillate between those climatic conditions, but we'll come back to that perhaps later. Now, what are the various components of social ecological systems? Now, we have ecological components and we have social components, which must be met by these rangelands. So the rangelands, in rangelands, we have the various vegetation, the grasses, the shrubs, the forbs, and many others, which provide feed for our livestock, among other things. And the pastoralists and the local communities have to use them in a sustainable way if they have to coexist without destroying one side or the other. Now, the second component, ecological component, is wildlife and livestock. So the rangelands are habitats for our wildlife and the livestock. And within that, the man or the man himself has various cultural activities which have to be met by this. For example, the Maasais, their main culture is, or their main way of life is keeping livestock. So the Maasais cannot agree to see the rangelands destroyed for the purpose so that he can survive. And if you can remember some cases when we had a case of Kenya, whereby we had the Aberdares ranges, which were being invaded by charcoal producers and all that. The Maasai's on the lower sides, they were having the streams and the rivers dry, and that affected their ecological components in terms of drinking water, pastures, and all that. So they had to make noise through their political leaders. So those people cutting trees and making charcoal around Aberdares could be stopped so that at least their livelihood can be assured. And I think it was a political move. And after those people cutting those trees were removed, then at least the streams have been maintained up to some extent. With that comes the seven wonders of life? That is the wildlife, they call it what? The wildlife migration around Masai Mara. That seasonal migration of wildlife in Masai Mara from the Kenyan side towards Serengeti, and they have to cross that river, shows the balance between man and his activities in the rangelands. Now, one major challenge which we foresee ahead, if the water catchment areas, and this includes those in the rangelands and those in other areas, especially the hills and the mountains, if they are not well protected, that seventh wonder of the world may be endangered. It will be endangered in that if those Masai Mara River, or if that Masai Mara River dries, you can see where we are heading, and we'll be losing an important tourist attraction. So that's why we have to ensure, while man is staying or having activities in these areas, he has to protect those rangelands so that it can have a wider use by other communities. We are also seeing among other ecological components of rangelands, we have soil and water resources. And that means in these areas, we have to protect the water sources in these areas and also ensure the soils are healthy in these areas. Now, to that goes with the issue of the land tenure and governance. In most of the rangelands, we find that land is communally owned. But one of the good things, the communities there, they have traditional ways of ensuring that those lands are sustained and they are not really overgrazed or destroyed. But come the modern way of life in the current dispensation, whereby there's a big competition between land for rangeland and land for investment, especially given, I don't know, in Kenya, can I talk of the housing scheme? So you find some of those housing schemes are being taken to rangelands because these people tend to think those places are useless. And this creates a big conflict between the pastoralists or the people who stay there and the authorities that be. Because at one hand, constructing houses in those areas destroys the rangelands and also blocks the wildlife corridors between the national parks, or rather between the game reserves and these areas. A good example is around Nairobi area. There's been a lot of mushrooming of housing and also changing the land tenure system from communally owned to title deed based. And this really causes imbalance between the range life way of life of those people and the current way of we are doing things, whereby we just move in, change the laws, and then we acquire those areas. I think the person from Uganda showed us how the government deregistered one of the lands from being arranged lands to change of land for commercial or for development. So these are some of the risks which we associate with that. And then there is climate. Sorry. Then there is climate and natural cycles. Yes, the climate, as I've said, impacts heavily on the rangelands. First, we have seasonality. The seasonality ensures there are times of plenty and there are times of scarcity. Now, this affects the livelihoods of the people and their economic activities. Now, I want to give a good example. We have the Tana Delta. We have two important communities there who live there, the Oromas, who are livestock keepers or herders or pastoralists, and we have the Pokomo people, who essentially are agriculturists. And from January all the way until August, they live in peace because there's plenty of water, there's plenty of pastures. But as we move from September all the way to December, the pastures are exhausted. And the pastoralists now move their animals into the fields, crop fields of these agricultural people or the Pokomo. And this really has caused a lot of conflicts leading to wars and the loss of life. So the balance, the climatic, the cycle of the climate or the natural cycles needs to be, I don't know who should manage the other. The people should manage their activities so that they fit within the natural cycles, but I think not the other way around. And so this is where now political intervention and leadership comes in so that people are taught how to keep livestock and diversity during the times of plenty of pastures, but reduce them, or rather do destocking during when the times are not good, so that these people or these communities can live together. Now, the Pokomos, who are essentially agriculturists, they use Tana River water. And even as time goes, during around that time, even the Kenya Power experiences shortages of water. And so they cut down availability of water, and that makes these communities even have more or aggravates the situation between the two communities. Because water is scarce, pastures are scarce, and I think life becomes unbearable in those places. Now, we look at the human ecology part of it, grazing, and we are saying livestock grazing affects the vegetation, which in turn impacts on the wildlife and the quality of those pastures. Now, the Maasais, their major inputs are mainly pastures. And during the wet season, they move away their animals from the valleys to the upper hills so that they give the valleys time for grass to grow during the wet season, and then the livestock can graze in the hilly sides as the valleys recuperate. Come dry season, these animals will be moved back to the valleys where there is now lush grass and they are able to survive. So for the Maasai, they have ensured ways on how to utilize the pastures during the wet season and the dry season so that there's no conflict within the natural cycles. Fire management. A lot was talked about yesterday about fire management in terms of controlling the rangeland composition and all that. And I remember Professor Oliver said it was a contingent issue, but it's something we cannot do with because, for example, the Maasais normally use fire sustainably to control the quality of the pastures. When those pastures grow and after 1 year they are overgrown, they become a bit woody and less nutritious and perhaps less digestible. And so when the rains are nearer, the Maasai set these old pastures on fire so that they can rejuvenate afresh. And that ensures they maintain the quality of the pasture throughout their stay. So they have integrated this into their cultural way of life, And so in no way do they have crisis, except when we have excessive droughts or famine, which may antagonize. They have also, so this movement up and down the valleys and the hills ensures that we don't have overgrazing. And the knowledge about this is passed from one generation to the other, because the youth, or the do I call the warriors or morans, are integrated into the system when they are young, and even as they grow, they have this knowledge on how to manage their pastures and their livelihood over the years. Look at Kajiado. Kajiado, we are having developers moving into those flat rangeland plains, which have a lot of grasses. And now those people, developers, they are moving in, and in my opinion, while they are bringing good development, like the Uma University and the others, but I think they are antagonizing. So there's need to have, I don't know, either some sort of arbitration between how much of this land can be taken and how much can be devoted for development, so that at least we have the balance between the two. Money is we call it an evil, because you pour a lot of money, that pastoralist is ready to sell his land or part of the communal land for that money. And that disorganizes the hierarchy, or the hierarchical setup in terms of how they manage their things. Then we have other land use practices. In situations, given some situations, we may have overgrazing occurring, and especially when unprecedented drought occurs, and perhaps that's why the parrots release come in handy, because they are able to move following pastures and water, and their movement at least ensures that overgrazing doesn't occur. But those permanent, or what we call sedentary or transhumane type of livestock keeping systems, in the bad situations, overgrazing can occur. Also, agriculture is one of the land use systems. A lot of people have moved in, for example, to Kajiado areas, whereby they have sunk a lot of boreholes and they are having a lot of underground water, and they are practicing a lot of agriculture. Now, so you can see the change of land use from rangeland or livestock use to agricultural use. And this is really having a heavy toll on them, because I remember I visited some of those areas, very good rangelands with a lot of grass pastures, but you find a lot of avocados there. Now, the driving factor is avocado have a lot of market in the European markets. So it's a, I don't know, balance between the two, the cultural way of life of those people, and now money moving in to have change of the land system. There is also mining, which comes in handy. For example, within Voi, we have a lot of the game stones. They got very good rangelands with very good grass, and the people there, the pastoralists there are doing very well. But when mining comes in, it disrupts or disorganizes them, because much of the game stones, actually where we have the game stones is where we also have the rangelands. Later, when we'll be looking at the rangeland resources, we'll be looking at, we have a lot of resources in those rangelands, and people are moving in to exploit them at the expense of the rangeland use. Now, we also have the cultural identity. Many pastoral communities normally have a lot of ties with rangelands, for example. Most communities, most faith communities, for example, Catholics, they tend to have some of their shrines in those rangelands, where they go for pilgrimage, and many other activities there. And so you can see they live in harmony. The shrines are there, the rangelands are there, and they are not destroyed by people. Even when they come to worship in their shrines. We have the people from Central, they believed the Lugum, or rather the high places were their holy places for offering sacrifices and praying to their gods. So rangelands are tightly, there's a link between the rangelands and the cultural values in terms of either the prayings, the places where people go offer sufferings, especially when the rains have failed, and all that. So these are some of the things which to date, they are still there, but their survival in future may be threatened by investors who want to look for money. There is the traditional knowledge about these areas, the indigenous practices, they often promote sustainability. For example, I think I've talked of the Maasais, who are very well tied to the natural cycles in the places they stay, in those rangeland areas. We have the coastal people, they have kayas. These are shrines where they go and pray or offer their sufferings to their gods. And due to the respect for the kayas, they have really maintained these rangelands untouched. So even when the young men are moving in to do a lot of charcoal burning and all that, these old elders have ensured that those rangelands which host their shrines are not interfered with. So there's a strong cultural tie between what people do and what happens in the rangelands, and also the cycles within the rangelands. Now, there is also now the economic ventures. Like now, the pictorial there shows us one of the hydroelectric formations where the water is tapped and then it's used for generating electricity. But that dam is surrounded by much of the rangeland, and that rangeland is actually a water catchment areas. So we see a good tie between the rangelands and sustainability of those dams, because so long as those rangelands, the trees and those riparian areas are not interfered with, the flow of water in those dams for electric generation is sustained, and there's very little erosion if a lot of charcoal burning and whatever is not there. So rangelands are good sources. They provide us various resources, and you can see in this particular case, part of the economic ventures by the government and also by private people is generation of hydroelectric power. And we can see this can live in harmony if well planned. So these are some of the things we need to whatever. What are the various challenges in these rangelands? One of it is climate change. The rainfall pattern and the vegetation patterns are actually changing. It's not as like they were before. And therefore, the people in these areas, in these rangeland areas, they have to adapt to the changing climatic situation. Recently, I think I visited some of the areas in lowland coastal Kenya, near Galana, Kulalu areas, and I realized most of the camels which you used to see in those areas of northeastern Garissa are now habiting much of the coastal lowland. Is because the climate has changed, the rainfall has changed, and these people now cannot stay within what used to be their normal domain rangeland areas of the northeastern. They now have moved to the coastal areas, and it would look like they are there to stay. So climate change is causing a lot of human activities to change so that they can feed and survive. Then the other one is another challenge is land degradation as a result of overgrazing, especially when unprecedented droughts move in. And there's also a lot of deforestation, which has led to soil erosion, desertification, and land degradation. Currently, actually, we have a crisis in Kenya, let me say so, because if you look at our water catchment area, starting with the Mau escarpment, come lower down coast, all those forests are threatened. You find a lot of young men with motorbikes carrying almost a pickup of sacks every day. So you can imagine about 1,000 bags of charcoal being ferried from the interior into the urban areas. How will be the sustainability of those rangelands with that? Now, what used to be traditional ways of controlling that, I think in Kenya, after removing what we used to call the Chiefs Act, now everybody can cut, burn, and sell. Formerly, you could not even cut down a tree. But now everything looks like is everybody for themselves and God for us all. Now, the pictorial, rather, the pictures there actually show part of the degradation. If you look at the top one, the land there has been degraded. What you see as valley there was actually a path of people and livestock. So with continued trekking up and down each day and for the whole year, so when the rains came, unprecedented ones, so the whole of that road, rather, let me call it road or Maram Road, was washed away, and you can see the type of degradation we are having. Then who owns up the damage? So can I say nobody is responsible because these are rangelands and some of these are communally owned, and unless the community comes and owns up to repair the situation, then this one will degrade further. Below is also a similar one, whereby a lot of charcoal burning has been going on, and you can see when the rain comes, is able to wash everything away, increasing the amount of erosion load. And we are losing a lot of fertile land and a lot of important land to erosion and all that. We have, I think I've talked about conflict over resources, and I've given very good examples, especially in Tana River and all that. But besides the pastoralists and the agriculturists, that is of conflict on resources, we also have now conflicts between investors and the people living in those rangelands. Good example is, for example, in Kitui, two major discoveries were made, one for coal, and then the other one was made on limestone. Once they were declared they were there, the investors went and purchased all those lands, and I think the local people were kicked out. So we lost. We lost those pastures, those rangelands, to those investors. Another case is the Konza City. What we used to have as the Kapiti Plains today is being replaced by concrete. Talk of Konza City Technological Hub. So that was a rangeland. We have lost that wildlife which was there. We have lost those pastures, whereby we had the wildlife and our animals were living in harmony and they were grazing in harmony. Now all that income is gone and all that good natural rangeland is gone, and now we are having a city. I don't know for how long we shall continue having many cities. Then there's also the loss of the wildlife corridors. Normally wildlife transcend from one region to the other one, like the case of the Serengeti. They move from Kenya all the way across the Mara River to Serengeti. They follow a given corridor for their migratory moves each year. Equally, each year we have livestock moving from one type of forest to the other. And now that has been blocked by construction of houses. For example, we have the Nairobi. In the outskirts of Nairobi, we have wildlife corridor. And I think that one has been a corridor between the Nairobi National Park and the other game reserve. And now that has been encroached and is closed up by whatever. And that's why even today we hear of lions coming to predate on people in their housing estates in Nairobi. Somebody would not imagine lions would appear in urban areas, but it's because we have blocked their corridors, which enables them move from one area to the other while they are following their predators and all that. So we have challenges in terms of what is the way forward in future? How can we preserve these rangelands and avoid them from encroachment? Our legislation seems to be weak, but can we do research to inform policies on how these places can be informed? We have the SGR, the standard gauge railway was built from Mombasa to Nairobi. Well, it is a major blockage to wildlife, but they have put up some high-raised railway or openings where some of the wildlife can cross. But remember, the wildlife, they stretch from all the way from coast, from the Voi River, all the way to Nairobi National Park. So all that length, you can imagine, the wildlife would like to cross to the other side of the railway, but it cannot. So these are some of the challenges we are getting. Then we also have the policy neglect, weak governance, and limited support for sustainable use of rangelands. And this is coming to where when we come to change of user, change of land use. I think those policies are just being trashed, and you find buildings erupting in every corner of the rangelands, and there's very little protection on those ones. That is a challenge into the future. What are the various sustainable management approaches? In this, we have to involve community-based natural resource management, whereby we have to strengthen these community-based organizations so that we can ensure those areas are protected. We need to inform on rotational grazing systems, particularly paddocking, through paddocking. This used to be very well developed under ranches, but with the time, some of these are changing hands for money, but some are still being maintained. That is the ranches. They really used to maintain and sustain rangelands throughout the year because the grazing was controlled depending on available pasture and all that. Then we also have land restoration projects for purposes of restoring the degraded rangelands and areas. We also need to adapt integration of traditional and scientific knowledge, and this comes in handy, and this is where organizations such as the one in on this stand, this one deals in camel and all that, Oxford, they are coming in to help and strengthen and integrate the traditional knowledge and the scientific systems so that use of the rangeland there can be sustainable into the future. Policy frameworks that support pastoralist rights need to be enhanced. We know they are already there, but they need to be strengthened so that they at least can survive. We also, and I think that looks like the last slide. Looks like the last slide. If you allow me, I'll move on to the next one on rangeland resources. And yeah, that's just 1 minute, please. I change over. Come on. Sorry, just 1 minute. Good. I don't know whether I'm visible. Am I visible? Sorry. Are the slides visible?
Yes, it is okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So I wish now to move. We look at things are blocking. We look at what are the various rangeland resources. So I'll first look at the rangeland resources, and then later on, we look at what are the various ecosystem services offered by rangelands. So what are the various rangeland resources? Now, by definition, rangeland resources are the natural features and materials found within the rangelands that support both ecological and human livelihoods. In other words, the rangelands are there to serve man. That's what we are saying. So what are the various resources which we obtain from these rangelands? One of it is in terms of livestock. These rangelands help us with livestock feed, either forages or dried hay, whichever, or grazing lands. So we are saying the rangelands offers grazing lands for our livestock and also for feed production in those areas where there is plenty of grass or forage. When we allow it to dry, we can conserve it either in terms of forage bales or hay and all that. So that they can help us match the natural cycles of availability, that is during when we have enough rainfall, we harvest and conserve the fodder or the forage, and when there is times of scarcity, we are able to feed our livestock. So under organized system, we should be able to fit within those natural cycles of the ecosystem. Now, besides that, there is also the wildlife. Rangelands are home or habitat to our wildlife. And we have some of the important wildlife, that is the elephants, the lions and all that. But important is to look at that pyramid, the pyramid whereby we have the grass, which the grasses and all other green materials which provide the energy from the sun. And this energy is provided in terms of grass and vegetation. So the herbivores feed it. The herbivores include our cows, our elephants, our antelopes, and all that. And then along the chain, these ones are predated on by carnivorous. We have the lion, the cheetahs, and all that. And along the line, since they are unbeatable, that is the lions and the others, when they die, they are awaited by either the hyenas and the vultures. And then finally, to complete the chain, they are awaited by the decomposers in the soil. So we are saying the wildlife is well maintained by our rangeland, but the most important thing, we look at that energy, rather that pyramid of numbers in those wildlife, and we see how they maintain one another. The wildlife in those rangelands, they help us maintain, or they help us to earn the tourism foreign exchange. Our tourists come to view those animals physically, not on the TVs and all that. These days, we have local tourism. Our local people, they move into those tourist areas, they look at them. Also, those rangelands, they offer, besides wildlife, they offer recreation facilities or areas. For example, we have those people who have moved into those rangelands. The Chaka Ranch, for example, they have installed some bit of development, and people are able to come and enjoy those in those rangelands. Like the Chaka Ranch, I think one bit we have wildlife where people will come to watch, and there's also some other activities where kids go and play within those areas or during those recreational activities. As I've said, rangelands, they offer biodiversity, especially more so for the threatened wildlife. We see we have various threatened species of birds, among others. We are also saying these rangelands, among other resources, there are those communities who live in those areas, in harmony with those areas. And if you remember, we have some tourists who go there and they are entertained by these communities. For example, in Coast, we have the local people, they have organized some areas, fenced them, and they entertain the tourists when they come with folk songs and many other shows. Then we also have the environment. These rangelands, they offer environment which is conducive for both of us, the humans and the wildlife. But besides that, they also offer places where we obtain minerals. Perhaps I'll come to that. Now, while looking at rangelands in terms of being able to supply us with the meat, the population is growing tremendously, and the normal supplies, our normal supply of meat may not be met by rangelands. Besides, there is what we call the raids in those our traditional livestock keeping areas. For example, in Turkana and all that. Those raids are discouraging the keeping of these animals because when they come, they carry everything and sometimes they kill people. So people are being urged to change their land use system from livestock keeping to perhaps production of maize, production of vegetables, high value crops, especially in the people around Pekera and the Turkana area. Now that starts affecting the land use systems in terms of range ecology. And this has an effect because when you change from one system which has been there for years to another, then the socioeconomic systems of those people change. I'm looking at those people around Pekera who have moved from livestock keeping because of raids, or what do we call it? These the raids, the livestock, the livestock raids there. The people have abandoned and they are moving to keeping of poultry. Now there's a lot of extension to show them how to keep poultry, how to produce crops. This in a way will in future impact on the meat supply. And when we exhaust these meat supplying areas, my biggest worry is we'll start looking at the wildlife in the rangelands. Already, we have had, if you go to some areas, especially in those tourist hotels, you are served with game meat. Now, that game meat is increasingly being used, especially in parts of Nairobi. And I think the other day there was a legislation which was passed, which recognized the use of wild meat in most of the urban areas. That has an effect, if it is not properly controlled, on our rangelands and the wildlife. So in other words, we may be overexploiting the rangelands. Sorry, to move on. Sorry, let me move. Come on. Sorry. I think we have moved much further. Sorry. Allow me. I think it has moved beyond my whatever. Sorry, 1 minute, please. 1 minute, please. Now, so we are looking at rangeland resources. The grasses, I think I may have talked about this, but so we have the various types of grasses in those rangelands, and these are important resources for our livestock, without repeating myself. We also have the various forbs or herbs, which are also important pollinators or source of bees. But one of the most interesting thing is that the rangelands are the major sources of honey. And this is an important industry, even though not fully exploited, but it can offer or it can complement the production of meat or livestock in those areas, whereby people can have other sources of income, that is from beekeeping. Then there's the shrubs and the trees, which provide browse for the various animals, such as, for example, giraffes, our camels, and others. And they also provide wood fuel, especially, and also construction materials in these areas. Besides that, these rangelands are important sources of medicinal plants. For example, aloe vera, among others. I think I've talked about fodder, and we said when there is overproduction of it, we can conserve it in terms of haze or in terms of other products. In the captions there, as I said, you can see these rangelands, they offer catchment areas, and they're able to sustain supply of our water and streams, and also to the wildlife. A good example is the supply of water to Mombasa, to much of Mombasa, comes from Mzizima Springs. Mzizima Springs is in the center of rangeland surrounded by very dry areas, but it gets a reprieve from the Chulu Hills, among other hills in the area, whereby the hills, they help in the peaks. We have fog and mist. This one condenses into water droplets, and they stroll down the stem to the roots, to the ground, and they are able to recharge the streams. So Mzizima Springs, as a result of this process, condensation of the mist and fog, which normally appears very early in the morning every day, it is converted to water droplets, and they are channeled through the groundwater system into streams, which you see. And they are able to maintain throughout the year the water supply into these systems and towns. They are also able to supply the water to our animals. And this is also, especially in the Hunter's Lodge, where in the middle of very dry areas, that area, we have a lot of springs, because the trees there have not been cut, the vegetation there has not been overgrazed, even though there is indications that in future, that may be a thing of the past due to human habitation, which is encroaching. We are also seeing in the below caption, these rangeland areas, they offer good water catchment, plant cover, tree cover. And this is what traps rain. It traps rain so that we are able to get at least continuous rainfall currents in places whereby we have forest or trees. In those areas whereby the land is empty, rainfall has disappeared. And people ever complain the rains patterns have changed, but much of it because is that they have cut down trees. I want at this juncture to link or to give a link between the forests and the rainfall. The forest may be in the rangelands, not necessarily the forest or the rangelands plants, trees, grasses, and all that. Wherever they occur undisturbed, these are centers of evaporating water, or rather, water vapor. When from this forest, when a mass of water vapor evaporates, it enters into the atmosphere. As it moves up the altitude, it is cooled, and we get rainfall back. Now, in most of the natural ecosystems, this is what happens. And if you allow me, we look at the Congo Basin and Amazon forests. They form areas where we have masses and masses of water evaporating, reaches 15 to 50 meters above the earth. They are cooled and they drop down the water. And this is what has sustained these forests until today. We talk of the equatorial rainforests. Now, with that, once those rising masses of air they raise up, the water condenses, it is separated from the dry air, and the dry air, it is as it glides down back to the earth, where it reaches, it is warm, and that area cannot have any condensation. So these are the areas which form part of the rangelands or deserts because they don't have. So in other words, I wanted to link between the Hadley cycles or situations whereby we have rising masses of air and descending masses of air. We are saying when a mass of moist air rises, it goes up, and since the higher you go, the cooler it becomes, those masses are condensed, they rain, they give out their water, but the air which is there, due to the coordinate, it is heavy and it glides back to the earth. As it glides through the other masses of air, this air sinking back heats up. And as it reaches the ground, it is hot. It is hot enough to ensure that no condensation can occur. So where we have arms of descending air, these areas turned out to be either rangelands or areas of limited water. And that can be explained by the fact that if you look at the globe, along the equator, or rather, along the equatorial region, to the north, 30 degrees to the north and 30 degrees to the south, we have deserts aligning themselves. That is, along the 30 degrees to the north, we have those deserts. Part of it is Sahara Desert, Arabian Desert, among many others. And to the south, we have the Namibian Desert and many others on that line. Now, for every forest giving raising arm of air, it gives rise either to one or more deserts. That is the point I wanted to bring in, but that can be covered during another time. Now, we are looking at the sources which rangeland provide us. The livestock, I think I've talked about that. They graze on this area and they provide us meat. That is the cattle, sheep, goats, donkeys, and camels. And these ones are distributed to the different regions based on the type of rangeland vegetation found in those areas. Yesterday, we learned from Professor Oliver that each region got its own type of rangeland vegetation, and that is dictated by the soils and also the amount of rainfall received. So for example, we tend to find camels in those areas where we have either shrubs from where they can browse and so on. We tend to have cattle mainly on the grasslands where they can do the grazing. The sheep also can do the mauling, and also the goats, they require those not so tall shrubs and all that. And then the donkeys, to the most arid areas, just like the camels, they can survive there with limited amount of water. So the type of livestock kept in those rangelands depend on the vegetation, availability of water, and the rainfall received, also dictated, the vegetation being dictated by the soil. So you can see from there, the livestock, they provide us all that. And in this case, in this regard, the farmers can diversify their animals during the wet season when there is plenty of pastures, but they can destock as the dry season approaches because there will be limited grazing resources. So we are saying these animals are important sources of food, namely meat and milk. They are important sources of income. For example, when the Maasai's the road gets too rough, they can sell one or a few animals, though not the case, and then they are able to obtain money for buying other necessities. They also provide a cultural value. The Maasai's are distinguished by having the animal. The Somalis are distinguished by keeping the camels. These animals also provide us with the labor. For example, the donkeys, the beast of the burden. It is mainly used in central Kenya. We also have the oxen. They are highly used in eastern Kenya for the purposes of offering the draw plow where tractors are not available. I think I've talked of the livestock in these areas, and we have the herbivorous, that is the zebras and antelopes. But one important thing to note is that in some areas, the communities have accepted what we call conservancy. Have accepted conservancy. I think Professor Oliver talked yesterday, whereby we have an organized private way of keeping these wildlife, but community is also integrated so that the animals graze together with the livestock, but the friendly livestock, not the lions, in these areas. And that increases sustainability of these rangelands because the people do not keep the wildlife, but they embrace them. And with conservancy, some fee is charged, and the people can benefit through social amenities out of the money generated from the fees charged. We have the carnivorous and the hyenas. They help us control the herbivorous if they overpopulate. We also have the other rare wildlife, the birds, the reptiles, and insects, among many others. So we are saying the rangelands are important in terms of supporting our biodiversity, supporting our tourism, and supporting our ecosystem balance. Besides there, I think I've given some clips of the hippopotamus. They live in rivers, inside the rivers, but they graze outside. And they have to live in harmony with other wildlife and also with the communities there. So we're bringing the issue of survival for the fittest, and that survival for the fittest is what controls the balance between the various organisms that is under the ecosystem. We have the elephant, which consumes a lot of herbage, and for its survival, it is important we sustain those areas. But like yesterday we said, we have grasslands, shrublands, and thickets for the forests, or rather the woodland forests, and then the forests. And each of these type finds its better niche where to live. Water resources, I think I've said about them. We said the hilly areas sustain the underground streams, underground water seepage, which sustain the various streams. It is these streams which help the local communities get water throughout the year and also supply the various urban areas. So you can see, without the rangelands, I think recharging of the rivers and underground waters would be impossible, and we will not be getting this clean water. So we have surface water, that is the river streams and seasonal ponds. We have underground water, that is the wells, boreholes, and springs, and they all contribute to the well-being of the rangeland people and the other society. So we are saying the water resources are very important for the people, the animals, and the plants in these dry regions, without which life would be very difficult. I think I've talked of the soils. The soils are the foundations of life in these rangelands. And you can see in some of the extreme part of the rangelands, whereby it is rocky, nothing can be grown, and it forms a good scenery for tourism, for those who are coming to tour, and also for recreational purposes along the line. But it also forms part of the shrines we are talking about. There are those people who go and do their bit of worship or make their shrines on those rocks, whereby few people can get there, perhaps because of their height or whatever. They form good tourist sites. For example, the one of the largest stones in Kitui, where it is alleged if you go around 7 times, you change your gender from a man to a lady. They form very good tourist site, and it is after that. So we are saying the soil is formed from the various parent rock, and it supports the plant growth. It helps store water in the soil for plants and nutrients, and also it affects land productivity. Now, the different kind of soils, they determine the kind of vegetation that grows in them. The soils, they need our attention, just as the rangelands do need our attention. If we don't care for our soils, they'll be eroded and nothing can come out of it. And they can only be like the diagram like the picture we are seeing below there, whereby all the topsoil are being carried away due to erosion, and only plants like baobab can thrive there. This is a very common scenario in Ukambani, where that is Eastern Kenya, where excessive droughts have contributed to the land being bare and susceptible to real erosion and also wind erosion. Climate is a good gift from our Creator, climate and the air. And the climate, we get various factors such as sunlight, good ample sunlight for photosynthesis for a plant to produce green matter so that we can get our food, we can get the grasses, pastures in the rangelands, we can get the thickets and all that. Good temperatures, extremes of temperatures in those rangelands, they dictate which animals will live there and which ones will not live there, because during the day, the temperatures may be very extreme, 30 to 40 degrees centigrade, and during the night, the temperatures within the same place may be negative 10 degrees centigrade. So it determines what type of plants, what type of clothing, what type of organisms will live there. Then we have the winds. The winds, we have made a lot of good use for them, especially in wind energy, production of electricity. We have wind farms in areas of Kajiado and Kinangop, and these are helping us sustain the power grid. Then the climate also provides us with rainfall, among other things, and it is this rainfall which sustains us as part of the natural resource. Now, the movement of the sun to the north and to the south each year, from being in equator in March and September. So in March, the sun moves to the north up to June, and as it moves to the north, it supplies two important things. Heat, a lot of heat, followed in 1 or 2 months by rainfall. So we talk of the movement of the sun being able to provide poverty and richness, because in the place as under the ITC zone, Intertropical Convergence Zone, as that band moves to the north, that from March, it carries with it 1 point too much hot sun, creating evapotranspiration, whereby those clouds climb, those water masses climb up in form of evaporation. They form clouds and they drop water after 1.5 months. So the Intertropical Convergence Zone moves up, supplying poverty first for about 3 or 6 months, and then rainfall following it. So it is able to distribute that wealth across the globe to the north and to the south. So back in September, in equator, it moves to the south until those areas of the south, providing poverty and also wealth to those areas. So the movement of the sun is very important in these in its cycles, providing those ones. And therefore, the range people or people living in those rangeland areas have to adapt to that. And that is what determines their survival. Good. So we are saying that ensures plant growth, water availability, and therefore the growing cycles. We talked of these rangelands being able to provide us with medicinal and cultural plants. These medicinal plants are used for traditional healing, and sometimes even they cure some of diseases, which perhaps we may not be able to whatever. Actually, it is in these areas whereby those people who make medicine, they come to get their raw materials from. We have, for example, the aloe vera. We have the moringa, we have the neem tree, among the others. So we have traditional healing obtained from these areas. We have also various cultural ceremonies, as I've said, the ones of making sacrifices and all that. So among the plants, medicinal plants, I think I've said aloe vera, the acacia buds, and the herbs, among many others. We also have other products, wood and non-timber products. For example, the fuel, the charcoal. This is what is killing our rangelands. A lot of young people have embarked on charcoal burning, and I think the future is more or less doomed if we don't do anything. It is not just in Coast alone, but in much of Kenya. And I do believe also in the other countries. I don't know of Uganda, but I think in Kenya it is quite rampant. Fuel wood cutting for sale and charcoal burning. We need to have a conversation of this. Perhaps, I don't know whether our masters and PhD students and also the dons can come up with the ways of addressing it, because that is what is killing our future. From these rangelands, we also have, or we obtain Gum arabica, a resin which is used for making various products and pharmaceutical products. We also obtain honey from these rangelands, and it got very good export market. Within also these rangelands, we have various crafts materials, like the ones used for making log hives, like the one which used for carving the Maasai's, carving the wildlife by the Kambas and many others. So we got many more products.
Hello, I can't hear anybody.
The same to me, but I think it was the speaker's problem.
I think he fell out. So if you can get 3 of them, it would be.
Sorry, I got out. Am I audible? I'm sorry. Am I audible?
Yes, now we hear you again.
Sorry, I was thrown out. I'm sorry. Sorry for that. Let me go back. Just where are we? Sorry. Allow me to go back. I was thrown out.
Yes, you had been with the slide on the charcoal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just 1 minute. Yeah, so I was talking about what is happening with our charcoal, and I've said these rangelands provide us with plant growth, water availability, and grazing cycles. The rangelands are also important in terms of the carbon cycle, and I may not need to dwell much of it, but within the carbon cycle, we have the various living organisms producing a lot of CO2, and that CO2 gets back absorbed by the plants, and much of it is sequestrated by the roots and the forests or woodlands, and much of it may be converted into carbon, into soil carbon and all that. So we are saying the rangelands also help us in carbon cycle. I think I've talked about medicinal plants. I hope I'm not repeating myself. I think I was here talking about the open land. So the rangelands help us with grazing
But actually,
land.
we don't see it if you ask where.
No, you can't see it?
No,
Sorry?
we don't see the slide.
Oh, sorry. Let me, sorry for that. Allow me. Come. Can you see it, please? Can you see it?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
Take your time.
Sorry, sorry.
Now we see your desktop. Yeah,
Is it
there
there?
you are. If you
Okay, thank you. Just give me 1 minute, please.
Presentation mode now. Yeah, there we are.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Yeah, so we were in this slide. Rangeland, they help us with open spaces for grazing settlement. And I think settlement is what Professor Oliver was talking about. People are moving away from urban areas into the rangelands. And because land there is cheap, they buy quite a large amount of rangeland. And a good example is this is as you move from Mombasa towards Nairobi. A lot of large companies have come bought large chunks of land with concrete walls. All those are rangelands. And you might think they are ranching areas with stone fencing, just converting the rangelands into development areas. So this is a challenge we are getting. Hopefully policies can help us. Then there are those ones who are coming and sinking underground water, others using the springs running through the rangelands like the Voi stream. These ones are starting high-value vegetable farming, and this one is encroaching on our rangelands, while our nomadic people come and graze them when it gets dry and bringing the areas of conflict. So we don't know who is in the wrong, the person who is coming late or the locals who have been staying there for years. Then we have also said these rangelands or open spaces, they provide paths for our wildlife and nomadic communities. And I think I was talking about this summary, the rangeland resources, vegetation, livestock, wildlife, water, soil, climate, medicinal plant, woodland, and open, and what is derived from those rangelands. And I think I come to the end of that. Allow me move to the last, if you don't mind. I move to the last presentation. Sorry. Am I visible? Hello, members.
Yes.
Yes, we can see the presentation. What are rangeland ecosystem services?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, allow me to first, I normally believe to start by defining, even if it has been talked about. So we are looking at what are the various rangeland ecosystem services. And among these, we are saying rangeland are the benefit, rangeland ecosystem services are benefits that we as humans obtain or gain from these healthy rangelands. These rangelands are vast natural landscapes, either composed of grasses or grasslands, savannas, shrublands, or on the open woodland. and they are often used for grazing, but also provide us with a wide range of economic and ecological benefits. And these ones are grouped into 4 categories. So if we look at the first factor before I move on, these landscapes, even though they look rugged, but this is what, during the morning, the mist and fog condenses, forms water droplets in these trees, and the water percolates deep into the soil, and it finds its way finally into the streams. So even though they look rugged, they really provide us with that. The same landscape, if you look at them, they look rugged, useless, but for most of the cement factories, these are the areas they have exploited, because underground, there is a lot of limestone, there's a lot of minerals, and many others. So for example, if you come to Kilifi, if you came to Kilifi 10 years ago, this is perhaps what you'd find. But today, if you come, you just find quarries whereby people have been mining, like the Kenya at the river mining. They have been mining iron, among many other products. So they look rugged, but below that, they are harboring a lot of minerals. In the lower photo, they provide us with water catchment areas, whereby with the time, because they are not disturbed, we start getting the streams maintained year in, year out. So we are saying they are very important in terms of providing us with ecological services, such as water, among the others. If you look at this photo, this is a good example. It has not been disturbed, and this is part of those areas of Galana Kulalu, far removed from human use, but you can see it forms a water catchment, part of it maintaining the Rare River and the Sabaki River. They occupy expansive lands. These are the areas we are saying they offer habitat to our birds, to our wildlife, and many others, with very little human intervention or effect. Now, among the services, we have provincial services. I know it has been talked about by Professor Wesonga. So they provide us with goods and services which we obtain either directly from them, and among what we obtain directly, we have food, that is the meat, milk, honey, and sometimes game or game meat. They provide us with water. They provide us water and medicinal plants and wood fuel. You can see now from just the clips given there, you can see that water is very clean. Clean because the area has natural vegetation, has not been interfered by man. The sages and the reeds growing in that river or even swamps, they help clean the water, they remove the heavy metals and many others, and in the end, we get very good clean water. This morning, I was traveling from Kilifi to Bungoma. The Voi River, the Sabaki River, they are all red. They look red because of erosion from the various places. When I arrived in Bungoma this morning, the waters was crystal clear. You can imagine the two. So these are some of the things. So the rangelands help us with vegetation that is able to filter the water. And the water comes from either the rain or what has been stored underground and recharged through the various pathways. So they provide us with clean water, healthy one, like the Mzizima water, which you can bottle direct, and many others. The clip below shows our reservoir of the protein bank. the rangelands provide grazing lands for our animals. Though they look rugged, but the animals are able to scavenge whatever litter is there and convert it into meat, which we feed on it. So the rangelands, in terms of providing those services, is very important. Then there's the regulatory services, the nature's control system, and these are natural processes that regulate the environment. One of the areas is climate regulation, for example, through carbon sequestration, where much of the carbon dioxide in the air is absorbed by trees or vegetation, and it is stored in the stems, those thick stems of trees, and also the roots. So they store the carbon, and so we are able to control the climate and to cool it. If you remember the temperatures, the ambient temperatures which we enjoy are dictated by the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. So the more of CO2 is in the atmosphere, either through production of burning fossil fuels, among others, the more it increases, the more global temperatures increase, and the more the effect of global warming. However, if much of that can be absorbed and stored in the wood, in the tree trunks, and all that, and also in the soil, then we get that our atmosphere or our environment is becoming cleaner and cleaner. And so we are able to live for long. We are also saying it regulates, or they provide regulatory services in terms of controlling the soil erosion, whereby the plant roots help to stabilize the soil. I think like the first photo you saw of those degraded lands, the roots were exposed, but they are trying to hold the soil in place. Then they also help in water purification and storage. They help filter the rainwater and the vegetation. Like the slide I just gave previously, that water is clean because those areas have the various vegetation which help absorb all that erosion, that is soil being eroded, it is captured and it is settled, and then clean water is released, just like in this slide which we saw. That is the one in terms of purification. So we are also saying the rangelands also provide for disease regulation. The healthy ecosystem reduce spread of livestock and zoonotic diseases. A very good example is within coasts, come the month of May, June, we normally tend to have what we call June winds, or what we call East African low-level jets. These winds, they blow very strongly during the mid-month of May or to June, and with them, they carry some of the diseases. For example, we have the poultry, the Newcastle. During that time, we have rampant explosion or outbreak of Newcastle. We also have foot and mouth diseases, and all that is brought about by or is spread by winds. So by maintaining good vegetation within those rangelands, we are able to reduce the disease spread as a result of wind. Then we also have supporting services, and these are essential for the various functions. For example, soil formation and fertility. The decomposition of organic matter and formation of soil are important in release or in mineralizing the nutrients and releasing them into the ecology or ecosystem. So this material is really into ecosystem, into the soil, and it is able to increase the soil organic matter where, for example, we have quarries having been dug, we start having the succession, deposition of the dust, deposition of various materials, and then the pioneer plants start growing. They create good condition for the other plants, and the bigger plants take over until we are able to have forest. So we are saying these rangeland supporters, we are saying they provide nutrient cycling services. For example, plants. Sorry. I hope I'm audible, somebody rang. So they help provide nutrient cycling processes whereby they cycle the nutrients in the ecosystem. For example, the herbivorous eat the grasses, the carnivorous eat the herbivores. The herbivores or the carnivores also die and they are eaten by the decomposers. And this nutrient, or rather nutrient flow, it helps maintain the ecosystem so that we don't have piles of dead animals or plants piling the system and contaminating, but they are able to be broken down and finally by the soil into various simple nutrients, which can be used by another phase of organisms. We are saying they provide habitats for plants and animals, biodiversity, and they are home to native plants, birds, insects, and animals. And they also help in pollination. So in other words, we are saying these rangelands, they provide support services. We have cultural services. I think some of them have talked about them. Cultural identity, heritage, and traditionals. And so they maintain the lifestyles of these people, of these indigenous people, even if they don't go to school, but most of them have been able to sustain themselves over the years because they have fitted their cultural way of life with the rangeland system, with the rangeland's natural cycles. I've said they offer recreation and ecotourism services, especially for what is safaris. Those people who want to go hike Mount Kenya, and also bird watching. This is very common within our game parks. I think about the spiritual value. I've talked about the various shrines, sacred places, the kayas for the Mijikenda, and the Migumo trees for the central people, and among others. Subukia shrines are well known whereby people go for pilgrimage. Then there's also education and scientific research where they do a lot of learning about nature, ecology, and the ecosystem. So they provide various services. In summary, we are saying we have the various resources and the various what is contributed by the ecosystem. I think I've talked about that. And I think if you allow me, I've come to the end of my presentation. I'm assuming Professor Raphael or Dr. Raphael is not around. So if he's around, he can contribute. And there was for services, I remember during introduction. I don't know if he is there. You can give him a few minutes to say something, and then as I wind or I speak questions and answers. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Simon.
Yes, please.
Thanks so much. Raphael is not with us here.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So I think you can just, yeah.
Okay, good. So since I've come to the end of my presentation, may I request if there are any questions, any additions and all that? But perhaps before I leave the mic, there is need to connect between the wind systems and occurrence of the rangeland areas and the processes. And so I would leave this one to the master's and PhD students as part of their questions to see how we can come out and merge the two, because the wind systems are very important. Once we understand the wind systems, we'll be able to understand also how the rangelands come about. And perhaps in how rangelands come about, I wanted to pick the relief rainfall. Moist winds, they approach a hill or a mountain, much of the water is deposited on the windward side. And due to elevation, the various agroecological zones are formed out of the combination of the rainfall, temperature, and solar radiation. But as the winds reach the top and all the water has been emptied, the other side becomes leeward. And this one is what brings about the various rangeland ecosystems, with the top having the rangeland forests, the band below that having the miombo or the woodlands, the dry woodlands, and below that we have the woodland thickets, and to the extreme bit of it, we have the grasslands. So there is a connection between the wind systems and the various types of the rangeland ecosystems we get. And this is also, the second arm of it is, how do we integrate the various descending winds and rangeland areas? So there is a connection between the two, and perhaps these are areas of either further research or they have been researched. So I leave them to the panel. Thank you very much for listening to me. Nashukuru sana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon. I think I'll just pick it up as I'll pick it up from there because our group was entitled to look into the question and answer session for today. So we first of all thank you so much for the insights and for the wonderful contribution on today's topic. We prepared 10 questions, but actually the first 5 have been covered from your discussion, but I'll just go through them. Then at the end, maybe you can have a recap. Then the questions we have for you actually will only be 3 and 2 for the audience. So to the first 5 questions, they were basically looking into what you've covered in the first slide. And that is, the first question was in line with what exactly makes rangelands socio-ecological systems rather than just ecological systems, of which we've seen the whole aspect with the human inclusion and how the social aspect is coming in to make the rangelands socio-ecological systems. And our second question, as we were brainstorming yesterday and looking forward to the discussion today, was about can you give us 3 to 4 ecosystem services that rangelands provide that people might not immediately think of? Because most of the time, yes, we know when anyone is asked about ecosystem services from rangelands, there are those which pop up. So our interest was in line with which ones are those that are rare or that people may not see to the naked eye, of which some you've tried to give clarity and some examples, and maybe the audience can contribute. And to the third one, we asked ourselves, how do local communities traditionally use and benefit from rangeland ecosystem services in East Africa? For example, most of the local communities that we have, yes, they benefit from the rangelands, but you find how is the question, and most of those traditional uses. And now, because we are having a variety of persons from Tanzania, Uganda, across the globe, so we were just trying to see, yes, how do these local communities benefit from the rangeland ecosystem services? If we say nutrient cycling, yes, so how does it resonate with them? And are there any unique ecosystem services that these rangeland communities enjoy, or benefits from resources in rangelands that are rare, that are not outspoken, but research has been done on, or some people here who are studying in line with the rangelands and so on could be looking into, which brought us to our next question that you handled in the second presentation. Question number 4, in line with, what are the main threats to rangeland ecosystem services that we are seeing today, of which you've handled climate change and issues around that? So maybe also, as we continue doing our research on in the changing times, what is that which is not talked about? And you've looked at most of the human activities encroaching the rangelands, and we appreciate you for that. And question 5 was in line with, how does today's topic connect with what we actually learned yesterday in line with the rangeland ecology and vegetation dynamics from Professor Wasonga, and we thank you for that. So our 3 questions to you today would be, 1, can you share an example of successful rangeland management that balances both social needs and ecological health? Maybe you can answer that one, then we can ask the other 2, and the remaining 2 are for the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Esther. Okay, I'll try to answer some of them, even though some of them I think had been covered. It's only that the question may look like repeating them. Now, the socio-ecological system part of it, how does it link to the human bit of it? Now, if you look at rangelands alone, without, first we will look at the hypothetical bit of it, then the practice part of it. If you look at the rangelands alone, without man, and a good example of that is, let's say, the Tsavo game reserve. It is sustaining itself. It is able to wither the storms of the dry period and the wet period without the poachers or anybody. Now, bring in the human part of it. People move into those rangelands and they stay there. If the rangeland has to remain stable as an ecosystem, man must fit within that and not cause any adverse effects to the rangeland. Now, this is where we are now coming in. In situations now where we have those rangelands and people are staying there, to what extent do they interfere with the rangeland resources without interfering with other organisms living there? For example, without causing a lot of soil erosion, without affecting soil health, without affecting, let's say, the tree cover, without affecting any given animal population and all that. So we are saying for that socio-ecological system to remain stable, they have to be balanced and the activities of man must fit within that natural ecosystem. So in this regard, we are saying man is just a single drop in an Indian Ocean, and once he has dropped in those rangeland areas, he should not cause havoc into that ecosystem as it is. So his activities must be limited to within that, but not expand his activities until we destroy the rangeland ecosystem itself.
I think that's very clear, because of striking the balance of social needs and ecological health in an ecosystem. It's a big discussion and we really looked into it. We have a contribution from Dr. Christian. Welcome.
Yes, Christian.
Yeah, thank you very much. May I briefly come in here to make the connection between what Anthony Aguero told us the day before yesterday and Oliver told us yesterday, and we have learned the different models of vegetation development, like the climax and the equilibrium, the non-equilibrium, and the state and transition models, and the effect that man has on rangelands. This is what Simon has now today very nicely represented here, outlining what services man actually expects to get from rangelands and what man does in order to obtain these services. And if man, as the user of rangelands, has in mind the general vegetation processes and the general models represented yesterday and the day before, then he may design his actions of resource extraction from rangelands in a way that the states of the vegetation are more or less the desired states, and that the transition between the states goes the way he can expect. So that is what we are actually driving at when we talk about social ecology of rangelands, no? The actions of man, which are determined not only by ecological necessities, but also by all other things that influence people's decision, that he keeps in mind that whatever he decides will have this and that effect on the different vegetation states in the rangeland and resource states of the rangeland, and on the different transitions. And pastoralists, or not only pastoralists, all rangelands users who are since centuries living in rangelands and inhabiting them, they know these processes, and newcomers to rangeland, they only must learn those processes. And this is why I have also put in the chat that the demographic change and the globalization of markets, which are new developments encroaching on rangelands, they put us in a bit of a very difficult situation, because all those are newcomers to rangelands and have probably not quite fully understood the processes going on. And this is what we must try to get sorted out, that we, with all decisions that we take on rangelands, we have the vegetation models and the different vegetation states and the transitions between them, that we have them in mind when we decide. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Christian. To our second question, to Dr. Simon, from your vast experience, and I think to also our professors on board, how can we better involve local communities in rangeland ecosystem service conservation? For example, during the training today, you have talked about sustainable management approaches, and we have mentioned 5. And one of the ones that caught my eye was community-based natural resource management. Most of the times, where I think there are some of our colleagues who are working with communities directly in a daily basis, and others who are not, and others who are willing to but have not yet gotten there through their researches. Maybe what would you advise, or just give some examples of if or when you worked with some communities, some techniques or some ways in which we can involve better the local communities, or some examples across the globe, just to see how they appreciate or can take care of the rangelands better through ecosystem service conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. One of the key important things is use of the participatory method, whereby you involve the people in whatever we do, whether research or conservation or whatever. So in most cases, it has to be community-led activity. So we have to involve the community when we want perhaps to conserve or to exploit a given service. For example, if we realize that there's a lot of erosion taking place, and erosion normally takes away the soil health or adversely affect the soil health. So together, the first thing is to sensitize the community, the importance of taking care of these rangelands. And if the particular problem, for example, is soil erosion, which is creating a lot of gullies, then once you sensitize them, you educate them the importance of that conservation, you go and together you try to show them this is how first we can prevent, second, we can heal the gullies and whatever else has been caused. Secondly, we have to involve the communities in rangeland restoration. For example, in situations whereby there is a lot of erosion, perhaps due to the animals, especially during the dry weather, congregating or gathering in a particular watering point, it is important first you show them what is causing this. That is, accumulation of so many animals in one place will cause a first overgrazing and then erosion. That is soil erosion or trampling of the soil and then erosion. So the next thing is you show them how do you reduce the effect of that. So the best thing is if it is water points, you create different fast-spaced different water points so that they don't have to congregate in one place. On the other bit, perhaps the vegetation either has been overgrazed over time or perhaps due to fire and all that. We need to show them how can we do bit of restoration either through reseeding or manure application or soil amendment. That we do together with them and they will get the importance of that. Then the other one can be when it comes perhaps the situations, the weather or the season has gone so bad. We know that there are those communities who are very okay or feel happy in keeping so many animals. But you can first educate them and show the importance of destocking so that you destock so that they can survive on the little remaining feed, but inform them that they can increase and diversify when the situation improves. So the key thing here is education and doing together or participatory approaches. And sometimes we also involve field schools. You involve them in field schools whereby they learn as they do whatever they do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone would like to also add to that, but we'll give time for the audience. So we have 2 remaining questions for our audience. And before I take the baton back to the audience, because I see it's already 12, in my team, I had 4 colleagues. That is Vivian from Uganda. I had Lima and Mr. Samiko H. And most of them or all of them are working for the Agricultural Research Institutes and also for Vivian in Uganda as well and my colleagues in Kenya. So I myself, I'm not in the same line, but I'm a student taking a PhD in Dryland Resource Management at Nairobi University and currently serving as a Deputy Director of Research at Lukenya. So to our audience this afternoon, we found it best to ask these 2 questions just to resonate with you and just to see if some of us were sleeping during the session. So to the first question is, what ecosystem services from rangelands are most important in your local area? Maybe we can hear from 2 or 3 persons. And the other question, or we can handle that one, then we move to the last one. So the question is, what ecosystem services from rangelands are most important in your local area? Maybe we can get some examples and more insights maybe on the other questions from maybe now the audience. Welcome.
And sorry, Esther, I think this is just also to let all of us know that these discussions can always go on even beyond this particular session, because I know there are so many questions that probably one may want to ask, so many interesting discussions that follow such kind of presentation and so on. So even if there are some that are left, we can still continue with this. They can still also be asked in the next session. There's no restriction. So maybe you can just pick 1 or 2 and then we can wrap it up. Is that okay, Esther?
That's quite okay, Professor.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyone with an insight in line with maybe Sami, are you there, or someone else? If not, maybe it's just a question that can just help someone brainstorm in line with what our discussion was about today. And the other question we had was, can anyone share an example from their region where rangeland management has improved both community livelihoods and ecosystem health? This is basically to help us the second part of from today's discussion, I think, and also touching on the last one on ecosystem services and how communities are benefiting. So we found the need just to, and I think the questions were much in line with what was discussed today. So we thank you so much, Dr. Muti, for the presentation has touched everywhere on where our questions were based on. So if no one may be willing to answer, it's okay. But I think as Professor Oliver has said, yes, I know these discussions can always go on, and we as members of Group 1 really thank you for the session today. We would have loved to hear just one insight or two from the audience, but it's okay. We thank our professor for answering the questions, and I'd like to pass the baton back to either Professor or Angelica. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a hand raised by Sammy, and since you so nicely proposed that people speak up, let's have his voice.
Sammy, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, panelists again. I don't know whether my voice is good.
Yeah, go ahead. You had an echo, but hopefully it has stopped. Go ahead.
Okay. I want to thank the audience. Esther was my lead in our Group 1 assignment. And I think most of the questions that we asked were addressed. Probably the last one, I want to help out with the last one. What was system services in your area that has improved? For instance, there's an echo.
Sammy, you have an echo. I think there is another gadget nearby. So you might want to move away or just reduce the volume from the other gadget.
Anybody? Sorry.
We ran out of time, the forum just said. So we keep it as a cliffhanger for the next meeting. And everything which was said already by your team, expressed by Esther, I think we don't need anything to add, just to express again, thanks to all the contributions.
Thank you. Great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, all of you, and see you online on 16th September or otherwise on other occasions.